Welcome to the American Institute of Architects Kansas City Chapter's Legends and Leaders program. This series highlights AIA architects and others that have helped shape our community, lead the AIA, and mentored a new generation of designers. Jim Calcara graduated from Great Bend High School in 1961. After graduation, Jim attended Kansas State University and graduated with a Bachelor of Architecture. Jim served in the United States Army with a tour of duty in Vietnam. In 1969, Jim landed in Kansas City, where he began to expand his network of colleagues and developed his architectural and design acumen. In 1980, Jim and several fellow K-State classmates founded Calcara Duffendack Manlove Architects, which quickly grew into one of Kansas City's most reputable firms. Through Jim's leadership, vision, and relationship, CDFM merged to form 360 Architecture in 2004. This 150-person firm was responsible for catalytic projects including sports facilities, corporate headquarters, hospitality venues, and higher education facilities. Jim Calcara has been very involved with Kansas State University. This includes the appointment as a distinguished visiting professor at the program in Castiglione, Florentino, Italy. This teaching position allowed him to share his passion for architecture and design with KSU architecture students. He's also involved with the KSU Dean's Advisory Council. Jim Calcara has received many awards in his career. He received the 2003 National Business Committee for Arts Innovation Award presented by the BCA and Forbes magazine. The 1998 Kansas City Business Journal and Myers Hoffman McCann Up and Comers Award presented by Junior Achievement of Middle America, and the Top 10 Small Businesses of the Year Award in 1998 from the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. In 2004, he was presented with the Distinguished Service Award at Kansas State University. Jim served as president of the AIA-KC in 1986. In 1980, Marvin Manlove was founding principal of Calcara Duffendack Manlove and co-founder of 360 Architecture in 2004. As a principal with these firms, he has primarily been responsible for establishing, growing, and leading the firm's reputation as experts in design of office buildings and workplace environments. As the first student to receive dual degrees in architecture and interior architecture for Kansas State University, Marvin has fostered an approach that made interior design integral to his practice. His legacy of building works has been widely recognized through publications and design awards for the ability to drive business objectives while embodying the values of communities and peoples it serves. This progressive approach extends beyond traditional methods and has led to several design patents. Throughout his career, Marvin has been active in Kansas City community, serving professionals, civic and economic development organizations, often in leadership roles. He's been a longtime supporter of K-State's Interior Architecture and Architecture program and has served as the Dean's Advisory Council in the College of Architecture, Planning, and Design. He served as co-chair for the capital campaign, resulting in the new renovated facilities for AP Design on the K-State campus. In support of his alma mater, Marvin served on the Kansas State University Foundation Board of Trustees. Marvin was also selected to be an alumni fellow at Kansas State. In addition to he served on the board of the Kansas Area Economic Council, Kansas City Young Audiences, Kansas City Architectural Foundation. Marvin served as president of the AIA-KC in 2006 and Corporate Real Estate Network Corps. Let's meet Jim and Marvin.
Hi, Jim and Marvin. I'm so happy to be meeting with you today. We're interviewing for the Legends and Legacies project at the AIA-KC. And we're happy to be interviewing you today together. That'll be a special event to have two partners together. So we want to start with a few questions about your background and how you became architects. Jim, do you recall what made you decide to become an architect?
Kind of, but I drew a lot of cars when I was in grade school, and then I wanted to pursue that in a more meaningful way, but my neighbor was a vocational teacher at the high school, and so I wasn't allowed to pursue that. But I had calculus and solid geometry and trigonometry in high school. So I was prepared to be an architect.
That's good. Marvin, why did you become an architect?
Well, it was pretty simple. In the junior high in a social studies class, so I'm 13, 14 years old, I built a model of the Parthenon, and my dad did a really good job. But at the end of this semester, the Wichita Eagle came out and interviewed me because it was a really good model. And after going through some things, the guy said, well, do you want to be an architect? And I said yes, and I've never looked back.
Excellent. And then you changed history in Kansas City. So I want to hear a little bit, Marvin, about your early career, where you worked, who were some mentors or influencers, who were the people that made a difference for you?
Well, there certainly were some difference makers, influencers, not mentors per se, but going back to college, Jack Durgan was a professor at K-State who created a program in the College of Architecture focused on interiors. And I really was enamored with that, got involved, and I really graduated with a degree in architecture, but a focus on interiors. And that was my career. And I ended up at Hallmark Cards in their corporate group as an architect for 4 years, where a gentleman named Roger Tom, again, had a lot of influence on me because he put me in positions and projects inside of Hallmark that were great learning experiences for me later on, because you really learned how to work with corporate clients in a different mindset. And from there I went to Lynn Scott Haylett for a number of years, 4 years. Then we went to Kivett Myers, subsequently HNTB for 4 years, and we were there when we created our firm in 1980.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Jim, what sort of early projects and where did you work?
I worked at Marshall Brown because they paid 50 cents an hour more than Bruce Patty. So I took the job. Joe Murato was probably got me the job. He lived downstairs from my dad's second cousin, so it was nepotism all the way. And I really think my mentor was Sigma Chi. I pretty much had a good time there, and Mike Foss was in the fraternity, and I pretty much latched on, and my pledged dad was president of the university, and Sam Four, and that was probably my mentor. And I worked for Marshall Brown, and then I worked for Abe and Singleton for a year, and worked at HNTV, Kevin Myers.
You know, I've known Jim for 61 years. We were in the same fraternity in college, and just the record, it comes as no surprise to me that 50 cents was really important to him.
50 cents?
when you made a decision to work at Marshall and Brown instead of PB Now.
Well, that was, believe me, 50 cents was more an hour was pretty Interesting to a young guy.
You know, when we started CDFM, mentioning HNTV/Kivett Myers, Jim and I had worked on a project together for United Telecom, which we now know as Sprint, in Altamonte Springs, Florida. And it was a really good example of inside-out architecture. I had done the interiors, I had done the program, all the early contacts with the owner, and Jim designed the building. So it was there in the late 70s that Jim and I really became comfortable with working together as a team, and really that was the start that created kind of our inside-out approach to architecture that really was the foundation of where CDFM began in 1980.
Well, and so Jim, do you remember that project too?
Yes, I do. And it had a bigger top floor than the bottom floor, which was pretty unique in those days. And we had a open plan furniture system, and I credit Marvin with that, and I designed the building, and we went from there.
And an interesting aspect of that building, it was exposed concrete, but the aggregate was not rock, it was seashells.
Cochina shells, to be exact.
Well, I've never been exact, so that's good.
Well, so you did found your firm then in 1980, CDFM, Calcara, Paul Duffendack, and Manlove. What made you decide to do that? How did you make that decision?
It was all my idea.
Of course, everything is.
So it's the Calcara, Duffendack, Foss, Manlove signatures and the name of the firm. Of course, the C had to come first, and Manlove was at the end. And I said, you could be the first president of the firm, managing partner. And that was it.
And I've been leading from behind ever since. It's interesting, Calcara, Duffendack, Foss, Manlove, it's a mouthful. We insisted that the secretary answer the phone that way, but I guarantee you 24 hours after we created the firm, we were known as CDFM. It just rolled out easier, and it took, I bet it was 2 years before we allowed ourselves to answer the phone that way.
Well, your firm actually went through a number of changes over the years. What were some significant milestones and projects that made that happen?
Well, I think to me, in retrospect, a significant milestone was the first 3 years. When we started, we couldn't buy a job in Kansas City. We were in a recession, and so the majority of our work, probably 75%, was not in Kansas City. It was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Denver, a little bit in Phoenix. And they were very formative years. We created very innovative ways to serve our client. When you're on a first name basis with Southwest Airlines, you know you're traveling too much. But we created some things that were really important to us at that time. And that kind of culminated with Jim designing the Tulsa Union Depot for Williams Realty. And shortly after that, well, then we started engaging work in Kansas City.
Well, I wonder what Jim remembers as those formative years. The big scene.
I remember that change was important. It didn't make any difference whether they got larger or smaller, because we did interiors. And so if they got smaller, we had to redesign their office space. If they got bigger, we had to redesign their office space. So it was a good marriage.
Probably the catalyst to our growth, because when you start out, there's 4 of us, and I don't think we knew we would be 10, but in 1983, we did get a commission to do Burlington Northern, 65,000 square feet, top 4 floors of corporate woods, moving their headquarters from St. Paul to Kansas City, and we had to complete the project from interview to occupancy in 6 months. And we interviewed against some very stiff Kansas City competition and won that, and it was a real confidence booster that kind of turned the corner on the firm, and in quick succession we started working with Lockton Insurance, American Century, which then was 20th Century, DST, NCAA, and 3 of those clients that we gathered, that we started working for in the late 80s, 35 years later, the firm in some respect is still working for them.
Amazing. Jim, you have some ideas too about that time period.
Well, I remember Burlington Northern. Marvin was probably responsible for us getting that job, because to do it in that time frame was pretty quick. And he said, you got to put a guy in charge of decision making in Kansas City, and that was the key thing. And I don't remember what the key thing was.
Well, we asked that they put somebody down here that on a day-to-day basis could make decisions up to $100,000 by himself or herself without any question, because we needed to move that fast in the decision-making process. For example, we ordered an emergency generator for the building 24 hours after we were hired, because we knew that was the longest delivery item. It just took creative thinking. Nothing can't be solved. You just have to figure out how to do it.
Well, about 10 years later, after all of that time period, in the early 2000s, you got involved in some downtown projects, H&R Block, the Power and Light District, the Sprint Center that's now T-Mobile. How did that come about, and what was your thinking about that, Jim? You want to?
Well, Sprint Center was a unique situation. We had a guy, Rick Martin, that used to work for us, and he was managing partner at Populous, which at that time was HOK, Sports. And he said, why don't you come over? I have an interesting solution. We can't let some out-of-town firm get this project.
Well, Cindy, I'm glad you asked that question, because we look back on our careers and we had a lot of really successful projects. But when you stand at H&R Block and Power and Light and Sprint and look at those together, so we got H&R Block, we interviewed for that in 2003. That was the first piece. Quickly followed by Power and Light, where we partnered with Buyer Blender Bell out of New York to do the master plan. And then the icing on the cake was Sprint Center. And when you look at all of those together and the formative part that they've had in the revitalization of downtown Kansas City is really pretty gratifying.
And DST, I want to give them credit to Tom McDonald, because he pretty much bought all the property at $40 a square foot, knowing that if it happened, it would go up in price. And so he was pretty early on a major player in that project, and we benefited from that.
Jim mentions DST. Something that we kind of forget, because DST was a very quiet contributor to downtown, but in partnership with BNIM, we designed 12 office buildings downtown. There's probably 20 or 25 buildings that we did all of the interiors work, but none of them have a sign on them. You don't know they're their buildings, but they're integral to the fabric of downtown Kansas City. And we're really, along with what we mentioned with H&R Block and Power and Light and Sprint Center, really a catalyst and an important part of Kansas City's growth.
Absolutely. And Jim, you formed a really strong relationship with Tom McDonald and designed his house, I believe. Yes. And so it had ripples. Your relationship had ripples that way.
I remember how that came about. Not the house, but all the work with DST. Phil Kirk was pretty influential with DST, and he set me down and said, if you would want to interview against Tom Nelson, or you want to partner with him, we will give you all of our work. And so I thought about it for 2 seconds and said, we'll partner. And that was a pretty good relationship.
An interesting byproduct of that relationship with DST was also the Avenue of the Arts, which Jim was really an important part of, and it was really fun to see the art unfold on Central through the years. Pretty impressive.
Who did you work with on the Avenue of the Arts, Jim?
It all derived from a speech that Don Hall gave saying, if you're going to do something for your city, what is it? And so I came up with the idea of Avenue of the Arts. We worked with the city architect and DST and formed the Avenue of the Arts. And we got funding because they had 1% for art for the Barney House Plaza. Exactly. And so they rolled it over into Avenue of the Arts. And 10 artists per year benefited from that.
And why don't you explain a little bit about Avenue of the Arts? So 10 artists every year were able to display their work.
We lived on, our office at that time was on 1015 Central. And at that time, that was the Avenue of the Arts. The Folly and the Marriott and the Bartle Hall, to name a few, were on that avenue. And so the artists put artwork on the street, and the first one was hanging large underwear between the intersection at Marriott. And Tom was supposed to go with me to council, and he called and said, I can't go, so you're going to have to go. So I went to pitch large underwear on the street, and that was the beginning. And they said, it's going to come down in September, right?
Still got a little bit of life.
Well, about that same time frame, your firm got involved in some sports architecture, in part through the Sprint Center. But how did that then come about? Because that became very important in the transition of your firm.
Well, we were discussing that question, and Marvin had a little different view on it than I did. We had hired Tom Wagner and Randy Bradar, and Randy became after a nationwide search, became the head of sports architecture at HNTB. And I thought, how is a firm in Kansas City a small firm at that time, gonna compete with that. So we merged with Heinlein Schrock Stearns, and the rest is history.
And they were doing almost entirely sports architecture.
Yes.
Yeah, it was pretty simple. We had to get bigger to compete. We had to get bigger to compete, and they had to get bigger to compete. So it was a great synergy that occurred, right time, right place, and was very successful.
And Marvin and I didn't like to travel, and we knew that sports architecture, you traveled all the time. And so by solving that problem, we killed two birds with one stone.
Yeah, looking back, Jim makes an interesting comment, because that's a conscious decision we made. We made a conscious decision not to travel. We really didn't get into churches, hospitals, schools, because they all had basically after-hour interactions with committees or individuals, and we were pretty family focused at that time. We look back on it and say, we had a number of chances to open offices in other locations following clients. Where would we be? Well, you can reminisce on those things, but the reality is we feel very successful. We feel very good about the successes that we did have, no regrets.
And I think we were 185 people, which made us the second or third largest firm in Kansas City. And that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, and so one of the ways that you used that influence was making sure that K-State got a new architecture facility. I think you're very involved in that process. I wondered if either of you would like to address that.
Well, you never want to wear green to the groundbreaking at K-State. I tried to pass off that was the colors of the university during the Civil War, but that didn't work. Marvin and I were co-chairs of the fundraising, which meant we had to make a larger than we wanted to donation. And the success of that project was pretty amazing.
We had going back to even before we started our firm, we were very engaged with our university, with K-State. We had always felt that it was important to be involved with the university in some way. And along the way, we both had participated in what was called the Dean's Advisory Committee. Jim was a participant when they really started talking about the need to upgrade the college. We'd kind of moved into a window that if you didn't have a compelling reason to do something, you might get another coat from coat of paint from the maintenance department. Well, anyway, one thing led to another, and we started an initiative that eventually turned the corner and led to the construction of the new facility. And so we were involved in the presentations to the administration, the legislature, a lot of kinds of things that you learn a lot about what goes on behind the scenes to make any major building on a university become realized. So it was very gratifying process, and glad we could be helpful.
Well, so let's talk about AIA and your involvement. Both of you were president of AIA Kansas City, and so I'd like to hear about why you were involved with AIA Kansas City. What was important about your involvement with AIA and your leadership there?
You go back to the beginning. When we started the firm, we really wanted to create what we called a top-of-mind awareness. You kind of had to be where the people were that you wanted to partner with or influence. And even though we had been participatory in the AIA prior to that, we really did feel as CDFM, we should exert ourselves into a more of a leadership role. So it was just a couple of years after we started the firm that we got Jim to run for president. It was really to create a higher profile for us, to create a opportunity for us to engage with our peers, and to have people that we thought we might want to engage at some time as the firm continued to grow. We did that again when we did the merger in 2004. We thought it was really important for us as 360 Architecture to be visible in our own profession and participatory in what was going on. So they were very conscious decisions to move to a role of presidency, but at the same time, we always encouraged our staff to be very involved, and hopefully to this day, we have extensions of our family that are continue to be involved in the AIA.
So Marvin and Jim, you both played roles in civic leadership too, as well as AIA. So why don't you talk a little bit about your involvement with the community that way?
Well, as I always felt, and I know Jim agrees, and as a firm, we really wanted our staff and ourselves to commit to roles in professional organizations. So the AIA, IIDA, Cornet, any other things that supported our profession. We wanted staff to be involved in the community. So Chamber of Commerce, KCADC, other kinds of activities. And then the third leg of the stool was to engage your own passion, whether that was photography, whether that was Boy Scouts, coaching, something. So we always encouraged our staff to be participatory and well-rounded individuals, and I felt that worked very well.
It worked so well that I had numerous chicken dinners at KCADC. I can't remember what all we were involved in. Marvin's run through a pretty good list, but rubber chicken dinners were the thing I remember.
So what you're saying is to be a participant in the civic community, you ate a lot.
Yeah, I thought of it that way.
Well, your partner, Paul Duffendack, now deceased, was also involved in the AIA, AIA Missouri and Kansas State, the reciprocity program, and also the Tallgrass Prairie. Maybe you could talk a little about him.
Well, you mentioned some good things that Paul was involved in, and he was very passionate about everything that he was engaged in. But one of the things that I remember the most was his commitment to the Tallgrass Prairie. It's kind of one of those things that sits in the background. You really don't realize what has to go through to create that. But in the late 80s, 90s, Paul was involved with, I believe it was the National Land Trust or the National Park Service, I forget the exact group, which is a private organization assembling land for the purpose of in this case, the Tallgrass Prairie. Paul was very involved in that organization, which by the late 90s led to the designation by the National Park Service as the Tallgrass National Preserve. I think that was maybe 1996.
Well, Paul was also interested in AIA Missouri, and he was involved with reciprocity, which meant that if you were a resident of Missouri, you could go to any Kansas school, university, for the same price that a native would pay.
Yeah, so the ability for people in Missouri to attend in-state tuition in architecture was important. And I understand that they've actually extended that reciprocity process to other states now. And it's served the architectural community very well.
Well, do you have something else you want to add, Jim? I was going to ask you about your other interests, your hobbies. I can see some paintings around here that I hear Jim has been
painting, golf, cooking.
Wine, and lots of wine.
I forgot about wine. Wine is the only one I still do because of various reasons. I don't do that much in terms of painting, golf, and cooking as I used to, but that was important because clients couldn't turn down a dinner, and there was a certain camaraderie around the dinner table that can't be forgot.
Exactly. Good bonding over those different hobbies. What about you, Marvin?
Well, grandkids, number one, anything that they need to do or want to do. Lots of time in the Lake of the Ozarks, filling boats up with gasoline and pulling skiers around. I love that. And then I have a little workshop in my basement, so I've built furniture, fixed things. I really enjoy that. Result is I have a lot of once used tools, but I try to consciously go through and use whatever I have.
Excellent. Those are fabulous hobbies, though. I wonder, Jim, what advice you would give to young architects if you have some ideas about what they should do and what you learned.
Well, I taught 50-year students in Italy for one semester. And I told them that if they didn't want to get up and go to work every day and they were enthused about it, they should get out now. And I still believe that. And that's pretty much my attitude towards whatever they did.
Architecture as a passion.
Yes.
Well, I think as you all know, architecture can be quite complex. There's everything from business development to the finance side to design to project management to construction documents. There's a lot of things that go into making a well-rounded architect. And my common theme when I talk to young people is learn all aspects of the business. But most importantly, recognize the ones you are not good at and partner with people that are better than you at those. Don't try to do it all. Learn early what your greatest skills are and excel at them.
That is excellent advice. Well, gentlemen, I've been happy to know you for decades, literally, and it's so wonderful to hear all of this fill in how your careers progressed. I got to watch them, now I've heard about it, and I appreciate your time today.